This is the new TC Pride Podcast, episode 123, on location in St. Paul for a talk about mental fitness with Scott Mikesh of 4D Fit. Twin Cities Pride Podcast. We are on location in St. Paul. We don't get out this way very often, but I'm really glad to be here with my buddy Scott. Scott, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So you've actually been on the podcast before. It was episode 50. We did an episode about Gay for Good's Earth Day cleanup. We're looking in the 120s now, so it has been a while, but we're glad to have you back here. Why don't you reintroduce yourself to people and maybe let them know what we'll be talking about today?
Sure thing. Yeah, Scott Mikesh here. I am the founder of a business called 4D Fit, and we focus on mental fitness. That really evolved from my work in marketing communications over the years, leading a lot of health and wellness initiatives, diversity and inclusion programs. And the last 5 years, I was executive director of an organization called Art Buddies that offers after-school programming for third through fifth graders, where we pair creative adults or adults that have a passion for creativity and kids to work with kids on art projects that really help the children believe in themselves, what they can do, what they can become through the power of creativity. And through my experience with that, I really realized how adults don't really believe in their creative abilities all that much, and how we sometimes forget really the power of believing in ourselves.
Yeah, there's this idea that we're all creative, that no matter what we do, like no matter what sort of industry we're in, that we're all creative. It's a matter of tapping into that creativity.
Right. And what you consider creativity, it's not about the product, but the process, really coming up with ideas, making them come to life, and discovering what you can do.
So we said we're in St. Paul, and actually you haven't lived here that long, so you got a new spot in St. Paul. Things are going really well for you. You've had a lot of success with your business, recently married. What's this like last year or so been like for you?
Oh, it's been great. It's been kind of a roller coaster, a bit of a cliche, up and down. I'm definitely practicing what I preach, practicing my own mental fitness focus. But running your own business, starting your own business, as you know as well, comes with a lot of unknowns, comes with a lot of risk taking, comes with a lot of questions that sometimes don't have answers for a while. But I've received a lot of support and just great encouragement and advice and direction through people who I've known for many years, and some that I've just been meeting through my wellness work as well.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere in one of your interviews that like you're kind of seeing yourself as sort of your first client, and so kind of like testing out all of your theories and everything on yourself, which is kind of probably a common thing for people that are doing this kind of work.
Oh, definitely. Whether you're an entrepreneur who is jumping and taking that risk kind of into the unknown and really having to maintain your self-confidence, or I think, as many people in the LGBTQ plus community can relate to, we will struggle with our own self-acceptance and, building our confidence that can lead to a lot of anxiety. So I personally have struggled with anxiety most of my life. Pretty much constantly worrying about what people think about me and trying to do my
I don't think you're alone there, man.
No, it's a running theme. So it's being able to just acknowledge it and open the door to conversation and understanding, and again, self-acceptance, to realize that, you're not alone. We're in this together, and it's a human experience that we can all relate to.
Yeah, it's been kind of, speaking of running themes, it's been kind of a running theme on sort of all the non-pod content recently too, is that, generally people that are part of marginalized communities, a lot of times they grow up with that external voice, sort of like telling them that, you're less than, or you're not valued in a certain way. And a lot of times that voice is sort of internalized. And as you grow up and start to face challenges and start trying to accomplish things on your own, there's that little voice that's sort of like always talking to you, like challenging maybe the positive beliefs that you have about yourself.
Oh, definitely. I think that voice, unfortunately, culturally, it could be in a difference in size of, volume or numbers, but in many ways, we are really a culture that doesn't understand emotions and the emotional impact of words and feelings, and we kind of have a shake it off kind of culture that I think it gets to be difficult to navigate and to understand. How do we really deal with our own emotional pain, what we're being told, maintaining our pride in ourselves and our abilities and what we can do and what we can overcome. I always, we have so many different cliches and ways to express different things without really understanding it. But even the notion that, sticks and stones can break my bones and words can never hurt me. But I say, bones will heal in the time that, emotions cannot. So emotions take a lot longer to heal than a bone will. And just to be able to understand how we really impact each other in non-physical ways, through words, through behaviors, through either our lack of understanding or understanding. When we can find people who understand us and can help us heal, I think that's an empowering thing.
And part of that, finding people who will understand us and who can support us, is being able to share, that we might struggle with these things. And I think a lot of people sort of their way of dealing with that anxiety or whatever it is to keep it inside, because, there's all this perceived stigma, right? And which is actually why I'm really happy to have you here today. You actually posted something, because that's what you do. That's your whole jam right now is you're all about mental fitness and mental wellness. You had posted something recently. It was kind of this moving little video that you posted about sort of the epidemic that we're facing right now. Basically, in the video, you had talked about how a colleague of yours, and this had happened a number of times within the last year or so, a colleague or a friend had taken their own life. And I think, I'm not a doctor, you're not a doctor, right? We're not trying to, in fact, you say right in your materials, right, this doesn't take the place of having, a physician's, diagnosis or whatever. But, I think you don't have to be a doctor to realize that, this is happening a lot. And a lot of times, I think that one of the leading causes of these tragic events is that, these people don't feel that they're able to share how they're feeling. They're not able to connect with other people or reach out or talk about what they're dealing with. And you talked about that in this video. And I could tell you were really concerned, and you were really encouraging people to not be afraid and not be ashamed, and to reach out to people and find someone that understands them.
Yeah. That's really why I'm focusing on fitness. When it comes to mental health, there is so much stigma, and it jumps right to illness. There are many causes to it, and there are many things that lead to it. And I actually just joined a board of a new organization called Growing Out of Darkness, that really is trying to redefine suicide. That most definitions that you'll find online, around in the dictionary, really talk about it as a choice and an action. And it really is a health crisis. So trying to get beyond the stigma of somehow that someone chooses to be unwell, that somehow somebody chooses to be depressed, that someone chooses to be...
chooses not to share what they're going through.
Right? Chooses to feel so hopeless and at loss that the only way to end their suffering is to, resort to suicide. And with the stigma, who likes to go to the doctor and get diagnosed with cancer? Nobody does. There's people have a reluctance to go to their physician if they are afraid of being diagnosed with something that they don't want to hear about. And it's the same way when all we talk about with mental well-being and mental health is illness, that there's that fear that somehow there's something wrong with you, and really not understanding the treatment options involved, the support that is available. It can be difficult to find. Unfortunately, in our country, we don't yet really have mental health parity. So finding resources and mental health services can be difficult. But to really be able to approach it and talk about it in a different way so that it really removes the shame and the stigma and creates hope that really is needed for people to find the path that they need to get better and to take care of themselves. There is a special hotline even for the LGBTQ plus community. Outfront Minnesota is another great resource with domestic issues. But it really is. It's knowing that it is part of the human experience. If you have, if you're experiencing a a negative environment, negative influence, negative information, negative media, it's the same as eating junk food every day. Your body does not flourish, and it's the same thing if we are in toxic environments, if we're in in places in our lives or in different parts of the country too, where maybe, there aren't resources, there isn't support, there is a lot of, abuse and homophobia and transphobia and just negative attitudes and behaviors that really impact people in unhealthy ways. But to realize that our brains need to be nourished and need to be taken care of in healthy ways. And it's not just a matter of becoming a superhero and having a superpower that can make it all go away. It really is a human need and part of our health that needs to be taken care of.
And I'm glad you mentioned Outfront's crisis line that they have. And they also do other training around relationships and making sure you're in a healthy relationship. I think part of this whole process of like mental wellness or fitness, I'm sorry, I keep, it's an emerging sort of like concept, right? Is always sort of keeping track of the relationship that you have with yourself. I've done some work with Domestic Abuse Project. I'm not like, I don't know about, a lot of these things on a clinical level, but just from the work that I've done, I know that, they say that there's a saying that, that being in an unhealthy relationship is almost like being like a frog, like in the pot of water that's boiling and like, you don't realize like kind of what's happening. And by the time like you get hit for the first time, you've already been cooking for a while. And that's why it's sort of hard to deal with at that point. I think like I've heard people say it's similar when you're dealing with like anxiety or sort of like those internal struggles, is like a lot of times you don't even realize that you're going through it, which is why that mental fitness is so important. And to get to sort of what we're here to talk about today, so you've actually developed a system of staying mentally fit through your new business, 4D Fitness. So why don't you maybe tell us a little bit about maybe there's fundamentals, right? And kind of how someone can get started on that path to mental fitness.
Sure. Well, and as you were saying too, I think a big piece of self-care and being aware of our own well-being and the impact of our environment on ourselves, the impact of how we think about ourselves, how we interact and think about others, is really our perception. So, and perception is based on everything we take in, all the stimulation, whether it's, visual, audio, thoughts, comments, media that we consume, how we really interact with our environment, and the filters that we process through them can alter our perception. And as you were saying, sometimes those unhealthy experiences or unhealthy influences can become normalized. And again, too, we are human beings. We will go through grief and change and anger and all of those negative emotions. So there's no shame in experiencing those emotions, but it's really our ability. Fitness is really about our ability to thrive and to be resilient. So it's not a matter of carrying a 500-pound weight continually until you break. That it's really about knowing your limits and building your strength and your resilience so that you can navigate and be able to deal with different influences and forces in life. So part of 4D Fit really is it's a framework that I developed, and it's a 4D Fit mental fitness model. And the intent is, again, really to parallel how we approach physical fitness. So in terms of health and well-being and fitness, the differentiator is that health is really a gauge of the presence or lack of illness. So when somebody says they're healthy, it means, hey, I checked out everything. I don't have a cold. I don't have a disease. I'm good to go. Whereas fitness is your ability to thrive or to achieve your goals. So if you wanted to run a marathon, you don't just say, okay, tomorrow, I've been, sitting on my couch for the last 6 months. I'm going to go run a marathon tomorrow. No, you might be healthy, but you need to be able to develop your strength and your endurance to be able to do and achieve these goals that you have. So the underlying principle, really that is kind of the psychological basis, is the power of perception. So in order to achieve a certain goal or be our best, we really need to believe we can, that we need to believe in our ability, and that belief starts with our perception. So again, what information, what stimulation are we processing and absorbing that contribute to our beliefs in our abilities that allow us to achieve? So with the 40 Fit mental fitness model, there's 4 levels of fitness. The fundamental level is balance. So really finding your developing emotional awareness to figure out what are you carrying and how are you balancing that. So we tend to put a lot of weight, emotional weight, on the negative, and might oftentimes forget to focus and be grateful for the positive. So you hear a lot about gratitude and practicing gratitude, and that's really a practice to balance your mindset, to balance your emotional well-being with positive thoughts, with positive feelings that have physiological aspects as well, producing serotonin, reducing cortisol, those different physiological elements. So it's really scientific in that way too. The second level is flexibility. So when we talk about flexibility, that's really about change, grief, creativity, the ability to navigate through the unexpected, to be able to come up with new ideas, to come up with new solutions, and to really rebound as best we're able. In flexibility, I talk about change as grief as well, that the brain really requires a process to go through change until it becomes our normal state of thinking, our normal state of behavior again, and that can be uncomfortable. And the ultimate levels of in the mental fitness model, an important one is rest and recovery. So there we focus on the importance of sleep, the importance of nutrition, hydration, being able to unplug, disconnect, take a break, and really making that a priority. That again, in this busy culture, we can, kind of negate that and think, I'm only getting 2 hours of sleep because I'm so busy, but that's a detriment to your health. That's not a healthy thing to do.
I feel like in this day and age, that's probably part of your system where people really struggle a lot.
Yeah, and it really makes that connection to the physical. So this is where we really start talking about, the importance of sleep and nutrition on brain health. So, your brain is mostly water. It's full of neurons. It has electrochemical impulses. It needs hydration. It needs water. It needs rest. I'll tell you something I learned in my studies as well is the impact of coffee and caffeine. So when your body is going through different cellular processes, there's a byproduct that is, it's basically toxic for your system. And that's a chemical that makes us sleepy, that makes us want to go to sleep, so that through the sleeping process, our body actually sheds that chemical during our sleep. And what caffeine does is it blocks the neurotransmitters that are impacted by that chemical. So it fools us into thinking that toxin isn't in our system. And then all of a sudden, guess what? You have a caffeine crash because the caffeine is gone and your body is full of this chemical that just is making you super crabby and tired. So caffeine is not a magical thing that makes you more awake. It's just tricking your body into thinking that you're awake. And so we kind of talk about a lot of those nutrients and importance of sleep and nutrition. And then the ultimate level really is strength and endurance. So similar to physical fitness, you don't start with strength and endurance. You start with, balance and stability, and then work on, developing strength until you get to maybe hypertrophy if you want to, build muscle mass. But ultimately, that build to endurance is a process. So the ultimate level is strength and endurance, and that being your ability to take care of yourself, your awareness of really what you need to maintain your mental well-being, and that includes being able to say no, knowing your limits. I often will use, again, the parallel to physical fitness, that there is no shame in a bodybuilder asking for a spotter when that is the most weight that person has ever lifted before. Because your goal is to increase, what you can do. It's to increase your strength, but you don't do it alone. you ask for somebody to help you so you don't crush yourself under the weight of what you're trying to carry. And that's a really important part of mental well-being too, that it's not a matter of doing it alone, that it really is a matter of knowing your limits and being able to ask for help when you need it.
And jumping back to the unplugging part too, so we're probably around the same age. So like, I didn't grow up like a lot of young people grow up these days, like just being constantly connected to electronics. You posted something, I think, on your Facebook page too recently about, we're talking about how we're creatures of habit and that routine, how the first thing we do is grab for our phone in the morning. And I would imagine that unplugging that part of that third fundamental has been really hard for people too. I mean, does it have you found like in your work too that it is more difficult for like younger people versus maybe people that didn't grow up that way?
I think so. Again, if you consider yourself, if you really think about your brain as a bunch of neurons, and those neurons get connected and they fire in different ways based on use, and that is with habits or behavior habits or patterns or mindset. The more that we do something or the more that we use certain neurons, those connections get stronger and they bond. And they, again, it's all about being efficient. Your brain wants to make things happen fast. So yeah, the earlier in life that we start to become, for lack of a better term, addicted to social media, to devices, that our brains, become accustomed to that constant stimulation. It's harder to remove that stimulation. And that's why there's also a higher incidence of anxiety with younger people as well. And there are links to digital devices and the level of social media, that our brains really haven't evolved to the point that we are able in a healthy way to consume that much information. And if you really think about the amount of information and the amount of stimulation that we are consuming, that's intended to be consumed, that there are apps and different digital interfaces and devices that are actually designed to be addictive. That's people want to be liked, people want the reward, people there are those aspects that are built into it so that they're used, and
there's the little serotonin boost every time they get that feedback, right?
Exactly. And there's a whole field focus on neuroscience for marketing, and just that some of our choices aren't always conscious choices. Sometimes they're influenced by our subconscious, and so just to be aware of that
it could also be another sort of like frog boiling in the pot of water thing you don't even realize too, right? I mean,
exactly. And the fact that if you're a boiling frog and you come out of the water, you might be really cold and you might not like it at first. And so that change, any change that really, this is what I talk a lot about too, is change that's really imposed by force creates resistance, because it's not a matter of shame or blame or right or wrong. It's really just the science of our brain, that those neural pathways that have been firing and firing and firing, suddenly they're told to change, and it can't instantaneously. And really that's what grief is. When you lose a loved one, someone that's been part of your neurological brain and providing serotonin, providing love, providing familiarity, providing all these wonderful experiences, and that person is gone, your brain doesn't know how to reprocess your feelings and get to a point of happiness. We can even feel guilty for feeling happy, and we struggle with how to reprocess our feelings in our life and our reality, and just to be aware. So with 4D Fit and the mental fitness movement, it really is a matter of raising awareness about how the body works and operates as a biological being, and how to really take the best care of ourselves. And by understanding ourselves better, hopefully that leads to understanding others better as well.
So you work with individuals, but then also organizations. What are sort of the steps that you would take someone on as they're getting started on this mental fitness journey?
Sure. Well, right now I'm actually launching to work with groups, and then from the groups I work with individuals. And part of that is to reach people where they're at. So I've actually done community workshops, and trying to get butts in seats is really hard.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
However, there are huge needs and huge opportunities within organizations and within businesses to help supplement wellness programs. Maybe it's a wellness program that's just starting. I also make the link to diversity and inclusion. So I talk about the intersection of diversity and inclusion, and wellness is really being able to care for ourselves and others. And just to be able to talk about, again, the brain and mental well-being in all capacities that really impact our environment, impact our work life, impact others. When we talk about bringing our authentic selves to work, what are we bringing to work? What are we processing? What pain are we dealing with? What support do we need? If we don't know that, we could authentically be bringing ourselves totally confused and not really knowing, what we need to be our best either. So it's really a way to support people where they're at, and I think in a group setting, it offers that social support. It's that I think is a really important factor to mental well-being as well, to not feel isolated, to not feel like you're alone, to really feel that everyone is in this together. We're all human beings trying to figure this out. I make a joke when I talk as well. I ask, "Oh, hey, where did I put my user's manual for being human?" Like, there isn't one. We're trying to figure this out as we go. And we're always learning, and we're always growing, and it's continually developing. And I think we should always be receptive to learning and growing as well. And I developed a mental fitness assessment to really help people kind of gauge where they're at kind of on their fitness journey too. So if it is, I'm not getting enough sleep, I'm really not, getting all of my nutrients in the day, I'm not drinking enough water, I really have negative relationships with everyone that I work with, I have negative thought patterns that I'm trying to get over. And even in terms of identifying those challenges, not necessarily, again, in terms of judgment or saying it's right or wrong, but it's an indicator of where you might be struggling and how you might need help or support. And I am a champion of creativity. So what I advocate for also is, if whether you are professional, creative, or an artist, everyone needs to tap that part of their brain to strengthen those neural pathways that really allow us to problem solve, that allow us to come up with new ideas, that allow us to come up with solutions. In the corporate world, you hear a lot of people talking about think outside the box. Well, what they're saying is be creative. Think of new ideas, think of new solutions. But it's really embracing that as adults, the importance of creativity as a neurological, physiological practice and exercise is really important.
And we should probably point out, people might be able to hear in the background, we actually have a family member contributing to the podcast today.
Yeah, that's Nayla. She's in the bedroom. We tried to quarantine her, but she's trying to break free. So.
And so you've been on this journey, developing the system really like from scratch. I mean, learning kind of where you can here and there from sort of the small community of mental fitness experts there is really in the United States, and developing the system, growing your business. What has that journey been like for you as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, throughout that journey?
It's been exciting and challenging, and I think any entrepreneur can relate. I did have my own business for a couple of years between my corporate days and then leading Art Buddies, the nonprofit that I was leading for several years. So I had some experience running my own business and kind of dealing with finances and taxes and pricing and marketing and all that stuff. But you really wear a lot of hats. So it's exciting in that way because you get to do a lot of different things. It can be challenging though. And part of my mental fitness journey too is to really help people get out of the box that we put ourselves in as well. We put ourselves and others in too. And sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. When we kind of get trapped in a certain perception of ourselves or perception of what we can do or what we can't do.
Also, as an artist too, like we tend to be like our own worst critics along the way too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not good with criticism. I don't know who is. I mean, I think you can build the ability to take criticism well, but nobody likes it. And I think the delivery of criticism can be worked on as well. I think that's a skill too, to deliver constructive criticism. And I think we as a culture could do that a lot better as well. Instead of jabbing the knife, sometimes, maybe you should use a spoon and just kind of gently massage,
Even as an artist, there's that cliche, right, of like the tortured artist, right? So you're like, oh no, it's horrible, and like I guess even the way you deliver that criticism to yourself can be either positive or negative. It's something you work on too, I guess, right?
There is. I think that's to be aware of as well, kind of what inspires you, and to make sure that it's something healthy. There is like we were saying before, I think there's something to be said for processing our feelings and emotions and pain in a creative way that can be cathartic and can help us get through that. I do think in the artist community as well, especially in Lower Town here, there's a thriving arts community. And having worked in the creative field with a lot of artists over the years as well, that there tends to actually be a lot of kind of depression and emotional wellness issues within artists. And I think
That's part of the cliche, right? I mean,
yeah, and I think part of it is, and there's this tendency for, if you hear the term selling out too, when somebody all of a sudden is getting paid for their work, because again, my theory, but with my creativity and what I have enjoyed doing in the past, it's been an outlet. It's been cathartic. And I think once you put a price tag on that and it becomes work, it's not cathartic anymore. And so I really challenge artists and people who are creative in a certain field. If they're a graphic designer, go dance, go do something else. If they're a dancer, hey, pick up a paintbrush. Don't do that thing that maybe gives you a lot of enjoyment, but also brings a lot of stress. Allow yourself to explore and do something different and get outside of that box of what you think you are and what you think you can or can't do. Yeah, so that's really the focus of my business, is coming in to do presentations and workshops that are really experiential and intended to be interactive as well. So I have some worksheets that allow people to just kind of assess and explore their own feelings and kind of mindset and thought patterns, but also learning about, again, brain science and the neural pathways and impact of different physiological elements on our well-being. So the business is really intended to be interactive, and at this point it's me going to clients and organizations. At one point, my goal is to have other 4D Fit instructors to kind of reach more people and maybe even get outside the Twin Cities more.
And we did kind of talk about how you've developed this system and kind of how you've learned a lot about this stuff. Where would you direct people maybe if they wanted to do some research on their own and maybe do some self-study in the field of mental fitness?
It depends on where. If you want to look at mental fitness in general, again, there aren't a ton of resources at this point. I do have a resources page on my website. So if you go to 4dfit.net, there are some other community resources, and again, what organizations are doing in different cities and in different states and different countries. But the other thing is to really think about your wellness in a greater capacity in terms of sleep, nutrition, relationships, and look at maybe your employee assistance program or other care providers who might be a counselor or a therapist, and really look at them as resources to help you improve your fitness and your well-being. Again, it's not all about illness. And even if it is, then it's a matter of, getting proper treatment and care. But to really look at those resources as avenues to help you be and do your best. And
if your workplace doesn't have a program or a wellness program in place, give Scott a call and he'll help you out, right? Thank you again so much for your time, Scott. It's been great to have you on. It's been a while. Hopefully it won't be this that long until we have you on again. And just one more time, just for fun, throw the websites out there and how people can get a hold of you.
4dfit.net. You can also email me at scott@4dfit.net. It's been great having you. Thanks for coming to St. Paul.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, great being here. Hopefully I'll get out to St. Paul a little more often too. So, all right. Thanks so much for listening to the Twin Cities Pride podcast, and we'll see you next time.
The TC Pride podcast is a production of the Non-Pod, nonprofit podcast community, and Twin Cities Pride. Subscribe now on iTunes, on Android, or by email at tcpridepodcast.org. Because we're in this together. Non-Pod turns your email newsletter, blog, or video content into a more powerful, more personal, more intimate, on-demand listening experience. Your podcast, your story, your voice, simplified, amplified. Learn more now at nonpod.com.